everybody is an innovator. Every human being was born as an innovator. I have 3 kids, but I can also remember from my own time, I was constantly curious in finding out until we work for a company where everybody is focused on efficiency and on compliancy and on not making faults and being the best in the world. The fact that you push people in a certain process and want them to behave in a certain way sort of closes that door to creative thinking. Constant pressure on the day-to-day operation is limiting people to think freely. And that's what you need to innovate.
When it comes to innovation management, I think we need to shift our perspectives about one thing, and that is leadership's awareness about the problems and where the solutions might be coming from. I think one of our preconceived starting points is that leaders are expected to know of every problem that exists in the organization. I don't think so. And the larger the organization, the less we should expect from the leaders to know of every single problem that exists in the system. But then we cannot expect for the leaders to have the solutions for every problem that exists in the organization. And I hope that leaders don't expect that themselves either, because many of those problems are best solved locally. The people who experience them every single day are the ones who see best what could be the best solution for them. And more often than not, organizations look right past through these people, their employees. The ideas that they have on how to make things better, more often than not, remain undiscovered and unutilized by the very people and the systems that would benefit them the most. So today, I want to explore the reason why do organizations keep missing on this innovation potential already inside. So to explore this question, I reached out to my next guest. My guest today joined a Dutch bank as an intern and then built a sales tool that got rolled out throughout the organization. By 2011, he was a strategist at Liberty Global and openly skeptical of the first assignment that he was tasked with, to engage employees in innovation. He was skeptical until 250 ideas came in and 25 of them got implemented. And guess what? Every single idea solved a problem that my guest did not know existed, and neither did leaders. My guest today is Roel De Vries, a founder and lead consultant of Riverstone Blue, an innovation consultancy he built around one single innovation principle, and that is that innovation is people-driven. Roel went from a skeptic to a believer of people innovation, from running a 3-month side project to running a global innovation function, from managing 45,000 employees on a platform to realizing a single idea in Ireland that saved 104 million euros. Not forecasted, but realized savings. So he is a great person to help us answer the question of today's episode. I'm your host, Iliriana Kacaniku, and this is Activate Innovation Lounge, a podcast dedicated to all the leaders with or without innovation in title who want to activate the internal innovators, the employees, generate innovative solutions that help business, and ultimately build distributed innovation capabilities that will help company thrive throughout changes. If this sounds like you, hit subscribe wherever you're listening. And now let's welcome Roel De Vries. Roel De Vries, I'm so glad that we finally have a chance to connect one-on-one and to continue to exchange about our joint passion about internal innovators and internal innovation and setting up the systems to activate those. So I thank you so much for coming to the podcast today. And instead of me doing the job, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience? Because I'm certain you'll do a better job than I would.
Well, thanks, Iliriana. Very happy to be here. Thanks for the invite. Well, as you said, I'm Roel De Vries. I'm 43 years old, married with 3 kids, and I live in the Netherlands between Amsterdam and Haarlem. And well, we're obviously going to talk a lot about my life within innovation, but I think Even before my real job title was innovation, I think I was always sort of from my own personality, always looking at, hey, how can we do things better? So even when I was an intern or when I was IT project manager, right, I was always more on the projects to improve stuff than on just sort of managing the operations.
So it started with making things better, wanting to make things better. Tell me more about it. How did it start then?
Well, how it really started, I think, was when I was an intern and I was at a very small office of a Dutch bank, and I just witnessed how various salespeople were taking different approaches to sales. Weren't always packed with the most up-to-date information or the most up-to-date product information. So I somehow I did it in an innovative way. I just made a little folder and gave that to a few salespeople to walk around with it. They loved it, and then I went to the marketing department, and eventually it got rolled out to all salespeople. And that was again, I was very junior. I was 18, I guess. So that was for me quite a nice achievement. That I think that no, that sort of kicked off my whole journey into strategy and innovation.
So that was that little catalyst
Yeah.
experience that got you into the corporate innovation. But as you moved on, what kept drawing you into this line of work?
Well, that's sort of that's the story that I was. It's back in 2011. I was working for the strategy department of UPC. It's a internet and television provider, like Virgin Media in the UK, for instance, or Unity Media in Germany. And well, I was a strategist, right? So I was making quite big business cases, right? Large projects, advising management. And at a certain day, we got the request from our top management in Denver. That's Liberty Global, the mother organization. And they asked us, and I got that assignment, to find a way to engage employees with innovation. And to be very honest, I was very skeptical. I thought, employees and innovation? Why? Why? We are strategy, right? We are the ones that think about the future.
Mm-hmm.
Why would we ask employees to come up with ideas for the future? So I thought, well, but well, we are the only, we as a strategy department, we were the only department that was sort of looking, into the future, and the rest was just managing the operations. So I thought, well, that makes sense that we do this project, but I'm gonna do it 3 months, and then I'm quickly gonna hand it over to somebody else and go back to my business casing and whatever important stuff I was doing. And then it was 3 months later, and we received 250 ideas, and 25 were selected for implementation, and they were all solving an issue that I wasn't even aware of, right? So I was, wow, the iceberg of ignorance. That's not just a joke. That's real, right? This is real, and this is super valuable. So well, I fell in love with the whole idea of employee-driven innovation. Um, then we rolled out that very simple home-built platform to 4 other countries, because well, obviously Liberty Global as the mother organization wanted to see it in the other organizations as well. Well, and also in the other countries it was successful. So that, well, allowed me actually to create a global innovation leader role, which I happily raised my hand for. So as from 2013, well, I was working for Liberty Global as the head of innovation, or mainly employee-driven innovation, right? And eventually, and this is a very long story short, but eventually, and I think we're talking in 2015, all 45,000 employees were active on the platform, and we were running global campaigns on what I launched in 2011. In all fairness, was a digital idea box, right? Do you have an idea? Then give it to us. Well, after a while, I saw that that worked in the beginning, but after a while, we wanted to find ideas that actually answered to a challenge that we saw as management. So we were running these focus campaigns, and then really inviting 45,000 people globally to come up with solutions. And well, some campaigns were really resulting in innovative solutions. Some campaigns were We were running a campaign maybe for Ireland, and then somebody from Poland said, "Well, we actually have this in place already." And then somebody from Belgium, I'm just saying something, improved that
Mhm.
idea, and that got implemented globally. So apart from really innovating in the sense of sort of inventing something new that really doesn't exist yet, it was also making sure that all the different countries that weren't uh, intensely collaborating on employee level were sharing their best practices in a way to make that globally available. And there was a lot of value in that as well, apart from just the true innovating and coming up with a new solution. Just sharing solutions, what is available already, was already very valuable.
So then it was those first 250 ideas that actually reminded you that innovation comes from people, not necessarily from processes and technology. Processes and technologies are going to enable it, but like the origin of innovation is the people.
Oh, absolutely. And my company is called Riverstone Blue, and the subtitle of Riverstone Blue is People-Driven Innovation. So obviously tools can help, and methodologies can help, in how you think. But eventually it are people that drive innovation. People want something else. They see what can be done better. I just don't see how, but especially why you should innovate if there are no people involved.
So I use very often a quote from Seth Godin from one of his very earlier books, Free Prize, if I'm not wrong, where he says that he never saw an organization that innovates people who innovate. And for me, that's always music to my ears. So same as what you're saying, because I've seen it myself. I came into innovation from international development, philanthropy world. And when you work in a small
Yeah,
organization, there are only a limited number of things that you can do on your own. But then you engage with the others outside in the ecosystem and you build the ecosystem of the innovators that you need. And you don't even call them innovators. They're your grantees, they're your partners, they're
yeah,
your
yeah,
collaborators, right? It's only down the road, years afterwards, that, when we start learning about innovation, that you reflect, it's like, oh, those were civic innovators or social innovators that
yeah,
we
yeah,
were
yeah,
working with.
yeah,
We were all in innovation space. Huh? So one thing that I want to follow up on your example that caught my attention is you mentioned the ideas. And in the innovation space, we know that ideas do not activate the innovation, but it's the problem. So was there any moment in time, you mentioned the call for solutions, the campaign for call of solutions, but was there any time down the road in that chapter of yours that you, instead of inviting ideas, you started centering them on a problem and invite potential
yeah,
solutions?
yeah,
How
yeah.
did
So
that
I think
happen?
that was around September 2013. That was sort of the relaunch from the early stage Spark with the home build platform to a real, a program with a strategy and a team. And I thought about how are we implementing ideas instead of just how are we collecting ideas. And by the way, that was quite a triggering insight, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just the fact that if you're just asking for ideas, the implementation ratio is super low because you're just asking for ideas. But if you're asking for ideas that people actually want to implement, yes, you will get less ideas, but the ratio of implemented ideas will be higher, right? And I'm a strong believer that everybody needs to be engaged and be answered to. So, having less ideas, and let me be very clear, I wasn't that's not that we all of a sudden were low on ideas. It was still a lot of ideas, but it was at least a group of ideas to solve a certain problem. And that also went in stages. So we went from sort of an idea box to, well, I would say value driven campaigns. How can we improve customer centricity? How can we save costs or something like that, right? So broad questions. But in the meantime, I obviously also started to educate myself on how can we do these things better. Um, and learned a lot on problem definition and on why problem definition is so important. And maybe one example which I think is always striking is at a certain moment, one of the senior leaders approached me and he said, okay, I want you to run a campaign to save costs. And like I do, I started an interview and sort of challenging him on what kind of costs he wanted to save. So I said, well, all kinds of costs? All kinds I want any idea on cost savings. Okay, well, then you're certainly going to get an idea to put off 2 lights, right? Let's turn off every other light and that saves electricity. No. It should save at least 100,000 euros.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
We're
Okay.
getting
And
far.
and can I just take 10 years to implement those ideas? No. I want it to be realized this year because I want to have that saving for next year's budget. So, okay, so you're looking for ideas that save at least 100,000 euros that are realizable within 6 months. Completely different question, right?
Absolutely.
Completely different question. And well, that was the campaign we ran. Obviously, I'm telling this story super quickly now, right? I think this chat took an hour to come to the final question. Ran the campaign globally.
Was this with 45,000 people in that organization?
45,000 people that were involved. I don't know by the top of my head, but I think somewhere around 300 ideas collected. And eventually, I think 18 were. I'm doing this from the top of my head, but something like 18 were selected for implementation. I know that. Well, this was around. So I left at a certain moment, so I don't have all the up-to-date numbers, but I know one of the ideas that got implemented realized. So not that was not a forecast, right? Realized 104 million saving in Ireland only.
104 million euros, dollars,
Euros.
Deutschmarks? Well, not Deutschmarks anymore, euros. And
No,
that's
no, no.
significant.
So
And that idea came from
104
an
in one of
employee.
our smallest operations, right? There is actually a YouTube. I'm allowed to say this because there's actually a YouTube movie on this. Liberty Global Spark. Was our YouTube channel, but there's actually a little movie on the successes that came from this campaign. That we published externally.
Can you
And
please share
and
the
again, this
link?
is a super small example, but this really proved for me that hey, if you're asking the wrong question, you can never get the right ideas. Well, one person I think I would like to highlight is Steve Shapiro. I think you spoke to him as well,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Steve was a
So
guest.
his book Invisible Solutions,
Yep.
right? I think well, I use those tools a lot to create my sort of interview guideline. It's actually here the canvas behind was the tool that I use for those interviews and the campaigns that followed. So no, I'm very convinced that that innovation should start with a problem, and even when it starts with an idea, you should go back. What kind of problem is this idea solving?
Exactly. And I'm curious, was there any reward for the ideator of this 104 million euros saving?
Of course,
Do you remember what
yes.
were the rewards that the company made available to the employee?
So from innovation, we already provided. So we we're going quite deep now into this one, but we called it actually. We were looking for smartifications because we didn't want to talk about cost savings because well, there was a cost saving twice a year. So we didn't really expect that people would be excited to participate in cost saving campaigns. So we called it. We are looking for smartifications. Also not to fire people, right? It was very clear
Right.
that hey, this is not to be lean or whatever. So we gave away smartwatches as a sort of thank you for those that that put the most effort in that
Okay.
in the campaign, I would almost say. So I never really like to award idea submitters because then you're sort of awarding the act of submitting ideas and not the act of submitting a good idea. So we did it
Right.
once and then we were overloaded with stupid ideas.
That's stupid, but irrelevant for the goal.
It's irrelevant for the goal, but it's also, I think it's the wrong KPI. It's stimulating the wrong activity. Yes, we want ideas, but I definitely also want you to be involved in elaborating that idea. and in validating that idea and preparing it for implementation,
Yes.
right? And that's so much more valuable. So I also don't think you should only reward the idea submitter because that's the creative, but you probably also need the skeptic that says, hey, I don't believe that this works, and then you can make it better, or maybe somebody that helps with implementation, or maybe somebody helps with the financials behind it. So there's a way bigger group than just the person that comes up with the idea that you want to recognize. I think that's A. Um, so we had sort of like a giveaway for the participants for participation. Let me say it like that. And we had actually a percentage of the saving realized with a cap, of course, for the teams that realized it.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful because, yes, I agree. You don't want to reward everybody for the participation. You want to recognize everybody for participation, especially when you start these types of activities for the very first time. And you definitely want to have an interesting reward in at hand for the winners, for the ones who come with best solution, or for the winners who really realize that objective of the challenge. And then this, like,
Exactly.
I
Yeah,
love.
and you know the what people think about is coming up with. If you talk about innovation, people think about coming up with ideas, right? And let me be clear, I also did it. I also started with just an idea platform. But innovation is so much more, right? It's indeed understanding the problem, um, uh, daring to test a lot,
Mhm.
scaling or preparing it for implementation, and so that the skills for that are never embodied in one person. So you always need some sort of team,
True.
and that's why. And you also want, it's not just the creative that you want to recognize.
So, what are some of the ways that companies that want to achieve these kind of goals with their employees can shape these? You calling them campaigns? I could be campaigns, could be initiatives, whatever word they want to use. But what are some things that leaders and companies can do to effectively leverage this internal employee potential to make things better in their organization and business?
Um, yeah, so I think you already know that's not just one answer. That's tough, but um, I think the main thing is almost allowing people to innovate, and giving them the trust that they can also do things outside of the processes. And obviously you want to have some sort of guidelines where people, that they cannot go outside of. But within those boundaries, it really helps if you can give them that freedom to think, and that they can be independent and autonomous, right? I strongly believe in the theory of Daniel Pink of drive, right? Give them autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And if those are combined in a space where they can play, so I often compare this with playground. So playgrounds for kids. That's the place where they play, and it's fenced, right? So they cannot go outside. The parents, the leaders, right, are okay because the kids are playing there. And kids are playing probably, in all kinds of ways with the swing and with the, not per se as grown-ups intended those tools, but within that space you're not breaking the rest of the world, right? And you can
Yeah.
come up with a solution, validate that solution, and once it's mature enough to sort of grow up in the real world, you can open the fence and it can be
Yeah.
implemented in the rest of the company. So well, maybe the answer is creating those playing grounds.
I love that because I call this garage. I really believe that every organization should have its garage, virtual or physical,
Yeah,
but a
yeah,
place where people are free to fail, free to experiment. And it's
yes.
interesting because I was taking notes. You use the word to allow them. People have used the word permit, license. So it's so much in the individual leader or few leaders of the organization, which leads me to the next question. And that is, like, in your opinion and in your experience as consultant as well, why do organizations keep missing innovators already inside them?
Because we believe in management, I think is the short answer.
Interesting.
I strongly believe, everybody is an innovator. every human being was born as an innovator. You know, I have three kids, but I can also remember from my own time, I was constantly curious in finding out. We all learned to walk, to talk, to ride a bike with falling and not
Yes.
giving up, but just getting up again and trying again and trying again and trying again until we were able to go on the bike. Until we work for a company where everybody is focused on efficiency and on compliancy and on not making faults and being the best in the world or whatever. People are and don't get me wrong, I'm making it a bit, I'm ridiculing it a little bit. Obviously, in large companies, you want efficiency. Yeah, I'm not ridiculing that, but the fact that you push people in a certain process and want them to behave in a certain way, yeah, sort of closes that door to creative thinking.
Mm,
Um, so the constant pressure on the day-to-day operation is limiting people to think freely, and that's what you need to innovate. I interviewed about 30 innovation leaders last year. Um, chief innovation officers, innovation directors, but also, for instance, chief sustainability officers that were using innovation
mhm.
to make their organization more sustainable. And the biggest challenge they saw was now versus next. So they said, right, we are training our people in whatever design thinking, lean startup, and we're even maybe sometimes we're pushing them into a sprint of 6 weeks or of a certain period. But then they go back to their day-to-day job. Yeah. And what does their line manager says? Come on, you have to do these KPIs because that's my target. I need to, we need to answer whatever this amount of calls, or we need to produce this number of items each day. Yeah, and then the time to think freely is gone again,
It's gone.
and they go back to the day to day job.
So, how do we work with leaders to educate them about this potential, the potential that is already available in the organization, but it's not recognized that it's there and it's not activated yet?
Yeah, yeah. So, and I think we are on that journey already, right? I think especially senior leadership really does see overall the importance of innovation. I think it's definitely more common sense already to teach people design thinking and lean startup methodologies. It's already more common to indeed do an innovation lab or garage, as you said. I think the final step is still missing, the sort of scaling step. How do you come from a validated idea in a way or validated innovation into a true implementation plan that the business picks up? I think there's a gap that still needs to be, it's sort of crossing the chasm almost, back to crossing the chasm. I think that's a big thing. Also in my current role, by the way, a big thing that I'm active with. And the other thing is, I think, making innovation a true business element. And what I mean with that is that it's not, you cannot just tell people to innovate and to think innovatively at town hall meetings, but then award everybody on operational performance. Then also put in innovation KPIs. And I think there are a few nice examples. I think Hershey's Kisses, even the American chocolate company, I think they have a KPI that I don't know the percentages by heart, but I think they have something like 40% of products need to be something that didn't exist 3 years ago. Yeah, then you do need to innovate. Also, as team leader of those product lines, right? Then you
Yeah.
understand, yeah, but I need new products because that's my KPI. And it's sometimes a bit saddening, I guess, that we need targets for that. But that's, I think, just the world that we live in. And let me be very clear. In my role at Liberty, but also later on when I was helping innovation teams, we battled the decision makers to convince them of accepting the innovation for implementation. And after a while, when you get no, 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 well, let's see what the target of that person is. Well, I can give an example.
Give me an
We
example.
literally,
Exactly.
yeah. So we had an idea to to give away sort of the app version of television to promote digital television later, right? That was the idea. And we validated it. We got a lot of positive responses to it.
Just
Not just
quickly,
asking, right?
what would this idea solve? The
No,
solution
so
that.
the ambition was, so we were a television company and we had a lot of analog television watchers and we
Mhm.
have a lot of digital television watchers, and we the goal was obviously to have as many as possible digital television watchers. That was a bigger
Mhm.
subscription, with more tools and more available stuff. So the idea of one of those employees was to give something away, which was part of that digital package, as a teaser in a way to lure those analog television watchers into digital, right? And we did all kinds of experiments, calculations, and well, it was a very positive case. Um, but I never got it sold. I never got it sold for implementation. And I'm using selling, by the way, deliberately, because I do think as an innovation manager, you do need sales skills. Again, it's like running a startup within an organization. Um, well, I kept on getting no's, until at a certain moment, I don't know, I was watching telly on the sofa. What determines that guy's bonus?
The
And it
sales.
was the number of paying users of the thing that we wanted to give away. And let me be very clear. Then I probably would have also decided to say no to the innovation, right? Because yeah, that's just your own sort of advantage.
Mm.
So I think, to come back to the question, I think the what leadership can do is to make sure that KPIs are not sort of ruling out innovation, and that's often the case. Which again is logical because the current business is always at the moment most important, right?
Mhm.
But you
Mhm.
have to already do stuff, if you sort of talking about the three horizons of innovation theory, right? You do also, during horizon one, you do need to sort of already test the waters of horizon two and three to capture that wave. And if you just stay focused on horizon one wave, you're just going to miss that second wave. Well, so again, for tomorrow, nothing is wrong, but for 5 years from now, you're missing out.
You're touching a lot of points here, but then one thing that I keep thinking is a bit of a gap, but then it's not the gap on the implementation, but could be the gap of the incentives, because if some of the incentives are
Yep.
centered on the executive C-suite level only, then of course nobody else is going to be properly incentivized to see innovation as valuable. Somebody may have an idea, but if that idea gets the pushback continuously, people are just going to give up or maybe move on to another company, or maybe just go and participate in open innovation challenge hosted by a competitor, for example.
Yeah.
Uh, but then in a lot of conversations, one issue that comes up very often that is an issue and a good way to solve and go around it is to distribute these incentives across all, and then bring incentives also in the middle management leadership, because they are the ones who maintain that rigid management, linear management, and they are the ones who are experts on those, and they are the ones who are be paid and responsible exactly for that uh, certain delivery of results of KPIs. But when you distribute this through like the incentive system all the way to the employee, the frontline employees and the middle management, and make this both incentive and a KPI on innovation, I think that's like a very advanced way to integrate the innovation as a structure, innovation as a responsibility, innovation as a capability, innovation as an accountability within an organization, which I think it's a bit
Yeah.
far fetched. But coming back to that gap that
That,
you.
maybe one thing to add to that, I actually think that you just need a very clear and proper strategy, um, including those objectives or KPIs. I think objectives in that sense are more realistic, but that may be semantic. But if you have a clear strategy and you trickle that down, and how does that strategy translate to your department and to you and your role? I think that is a big thing. And then if senior leadership says yes, we also need to innovate, right? And you trickle that down, then it becomes sort of everybody's role. And I see that overall targets are not really strategic in looking forward, but more at managing the current organization.
Except that, like, for organizations that have had some experience with innovation, they already have insights, experience, feedback from their own past activities to inform their own innovation strategy. But for an organization that does not have anything formalized, they need to start somewhere. I have my
Yeah.
own hypothesis, but from what have you seen works in your career? Like, if an
So
organization does not have an innovation strategy, does not have experience, but at least the leadership is very curious and very keen to start building that innovation capability inside, what's a good starting point, a practical starting point that you would recommend?
yeah, I'm not really sure if it's the most practical, to be honest, but I do think it's the best way. I strongly believe in beginning with the end in mind. I've witnessed it myself, right? If you just start with asking for ideas, or if you just start with training people with no follow up, they see it's innovation theater, right? Yeah, but you asked me for ideas, and now there's nothing to pick it up and to or decide on it or evaluate it or implement it, realize it. So I think thinking about how are we actually gonna evaluate and grow ideas after submission or after sharing, right? It's not only it's any idea actually. That, and also how are we gonna get it realized, including the whole challenge we just talked about, that there is a conflict, sort of a choice to be made between maybe more operational activities and innovative activities. How are you gonna make a good decision between them, or how you're going to properly prioritize them? I think that's one of the most important things, because what happens if you as a senior leader, you are very, very fond about innovating and tell everybody, yeah, we want your disruptive ideas, right? And then uh, once evaluated, yeah, that's too uncertain, or that's too risky. We're not gonna do it. Then employees overall are very, very enthusiastic to participate in innovation, is my experience. Um, so if you sort of first lure them in with a nice talk about innovation and we want your ideas, then they put their efforts into it, and then nothing happens, or then there's actually a pushback, even worse. Yeah, you just lose those people. They are gonna say, yeah, but uh, last year you asked for ideas as well, and then I participated and nothing happened. I'm not even gonna participate anymore this year. We actually we saw this happening with sort of the relaunch of Spark. We really had to prove ourselves again.
So unpack this more, this example. Tell me more about this example.
I think you have to be clear to yourself what you're really looking for. What you're really looking for. And that means, what am I willing to invest in? Am I willing to invest people and money into the idea, that the solution that we don't know yet? And adjust your question to that. And I think overall that would mean, and I think that's what I have always been advising, start with the not too big innovation, right? Don't directly start with some super far-fetched Horizon 3 innovation. Again, chances are quite low that it gets accepted. And even if it gets accepted, it takes a very long time, right? Until it's realized. And you do need that realization within organizations to sort of prove that your process works. I really always say to innovation teams, really make sure that something gets realized ASAP, because that allows you to prove that your innovation process works, and that will, engage more people to participate, and eventually you obviously want as many people engaged as possible.
One way to ensure the realization, because this also goes back to that gap that you mentioned, that gap between ideation and implementation, is to set up an entrepreneurship program or
Yeah.
entrepreneur line. And that means that the person who generates or produces the idea, the person who ideates, has a stake or has a leadership to implement the idea that they have presented. And would you recommend for organizations to sometimes start directly with entrepreneurship program, with regardless of how small a scale? Or would you rather recommend start with ideas on small problem and then have the innovation team or a product team or a marketing team work on implementing the idea that has proven the best on that small issue that is being attempted to be solved?
No, I think that depends on the ambitions that you have with innovation. I think, I share that we got quite some big ideas out of our ideation platform at Liberty Global, but the number of radical ideas in there were very low, right? So the real game changes or business model innovation ideas, we didn't really receive. Um, which I think you can get through, well, which I would actually advise on to start sourcing through entrepreneurship programs. So I think what kind of tool you use, or what kind of program you set up depends on what kind of innovation ambition you have. So having that said, it was 2015. We had our platform rolled out, or at least rolled out to a large group of people. We were, I don't know, probably at 15,000 ideas or something like that.
Wow.
So we saw that people were, yeah, that people were willing to put their ideas in, to participate in a program. But you can imagine, right? If you ask for ideas on a platform, what you get are 2 lines of text.
Okay.
Sometimes 5, right? It's an idea. It's an idea. It's not an implementation plan. So, and then we went back, we talked with them we used the platform to collaborate with them, and we said, hey, can you maybe, whatever, do some customer interviews to identify if this problem is actually valid, right? Or can you identify how many people are actually facing this problem? How big is it? Can you run a little prototype on your idea to get some experience back from leaders? And we obviously explained, there are 2 lines of text, our bosses are not going to say yes to this. It needs more. There needs to be a case. So we asked them, and then they said, I don't know what you expect. I don't have time. I don't have money. That was it, right? And everybody said that. So I started looking around. So how can we fix this? Because these were my customers, right? My
Mhm.
colleagues in a way. How can I help them become better innovators? And I explored a lot of trainings, right? People, we're gonna take your people 2 days outside of the office, and then they're gonna be taught in design thinking, etc. Um, I never believed in that. It's innovation is like an art. I really think it's not something that you learn from a book. It might give you some insights and some methodologies, but you know knowing what kind of prototype exists doesn't make you into an experienced experimenter, right? Knowing how to do what a problem interview is doesn't make you a good interviewer. So I think you have to do it. So eventually I landed on the Kickbox program by Adobe.
Mhm.
They developed it in-house for actually a very similar reason, and they then white labeled it. So you see it in the background here. That's our box. So the program
Nice.
was called Spark, the Spark of Fire. So our box was called Matchbox, and we trained 50 people in entrepreneurship. Right. So that was sort of design thinking plus lean startup, and then there was a second box for scaling. And that allowed them, so already during the course, we taught them sort of different methodologies and tools, how to use it. And then they sort of during the training days, they already applied it sort of on a fake idea. And we could talk about their experience with that. And then they actually got 90 days to apply their new learnings to an idea in real life while working on the job, right? So they learned also to be an innovator next to being an employee. And then there was a pitch where they presented their findings. So the YouTube channel I just shared, the videos are there, if you don't believe me. And that is super strong, right? I think that approach, that's also the approach that I sort of followed in my career as innovation consultant, where I helped organizations. So you see some other boxes as well there in the background, where we helped set up very specific innovation or entrepreneurship programs for organizations. You can imagine that an entrepreneurship program for a television company is completely different than, that's the blue one, an entrepreneurship program for a healthcare organization, right? They don't do landing pages and see how many people click buy, right? In healthcare. So it's a completely different way of experimenting, but it's still problem, solution finding, acceptance finding, right? Those are the sort of the three most high level steps that I think an innovation process is. So problem finding, solution finding, acceptance finding. And in some companies, we actually built 3 boxes for those. So they went to the problem phase, presented it, pitched it, got acceptance. Yes, this is a problem that we want you to work on. You get support, and that's often funding as well as some little funding. Go find a solution and run experiments. Well, you can imagine that was a cycle that could repeat. That's not always just one cycle. And then, yes, we have a validated idea. We've proven that customers are willing to pay for it. We can build it internally and it makes a proper business case. Okay, then you go into that scaling phase, which is, making sure that it gets implemented, right, throughout the organization. And well, that works out really well. And now I'm going to get back to your question. This is a lot of effort. So you don't want to do this for incremental innovations. Then you might save 10%, but it's not really worth it because you put in way more effort. So there we obviously stimulated people. So within Liberty, we always had the CEO that's open to training, that sort of shared the strategy. What do I want you to go to? We made sure that C-level instructed middle management that those people actually got 10% off to work on innovation and not just a fake promise that the middle management overruled. No, middle management was also instructed, you have to do this. And we made sure that there was a picture that they could actually, go back to present their findings in a way. And we always we always said we are creating entrepreneurs, and that was really true. So it was not aimed at finding innovations, which we did find, of course, but we said we are training entrepreneurs, and even the people that got no on their request, we even sometimes actually in some companies did funeral pitches, right? So all 50 people got to pitch because we believe that pitching is also a skill that you want to learn. And we also believe that if your experiment fails, that results in a learning that the entire company should know. So do a funeral pitch. So this is why this was the problem. This was my idea. We did some experiments. Well, apparently nobody's willing to buy this. So we advise you to not invest in this, aka we are saving you that wrong investment. That's then the result of the learning, right? Or let's just stop. Or hey, I have another idea to solve that problem. Can I continue with that one? So in that way, that's what I want to say. Those people that were doing funeral speeches were sometimes even felt like they maybe learned more than the ones that did positive pitches, because they really saw, oh, okay, this is why it's going wrong. And that, well, again, sometimes you need to fail to learn.
What I like with this funeral pitches is that's the celebration of permission to fail, allow us to fail.
Indeed.
It's not like, again, like in the industry, the word is failure is used more often than it should, but I would rather just call them as sessions to capture what do we know now that we would not know without
Yeah,
information, right? And celebrate as you highlighted. But then what I'm also what also caught my attention is your separation of the entrepreneurship and ideas for incremental innovation. I tend to agree because what I'm seeing, like, it's true that even innovation management has a lot of work. It is labor intensive. It's not just simply calling ideas and then celebrate. No, there's like calling for ideas is just the very beginning, and don't do any fancy
can I
things
just
up
say
and
something about it? Can
separately.
I say
Please,
something?
please.
Can, if you take that approach, so if you take the simple start approach to just call for ideas, that is actually resulting in more work in the end.
Oh
If you
yeah,
spend time on a proper problem definition, the rest of the journey is going to be simpler. The
absolutely.
whole that's a mistake that almost every starting innovator makes, me included. Let me very honest there. So I also made that mistake, but
Tell me more about your
taking
mistake
the
then.
easy route is going to backfire always.
Give me an example about an easy route that you took and
Well,
it
well,
backfired.
like almost every, and this is, I don't think a lot of companies are doing this anymore, but a lot of companies just launched the digital idea box, right? So the box that was literally on the wall collecting dust became a platform, but
Uh-huh.
in a way it was still collecting dust, right? So, and then just ask for ideas. Um, I briefly said it, but I strongly, it is a people business, right? I think everything is a people business, but innovation especially, um, or maybe business. I once read that an organization is a company of people, and that's why it's called a company. Well, I think
Yeah,
that's quite striking. Everybody that participates in these kinds of innovation programs are doing this on top of their job, right? Nobody's starting an innovation program and just say, "Oh, Google is," but for the rest, nobody is doing, "Oh, let's just give everybody 10% and see what gets out of it." Most companies launch an idea box and they just expect that people are doing that on top of their job, right? So people are putting extra time, extra efforts into something to improve the company that they're in many cases not even getting the rewards of, right? If the company becomes so much more efficient, it's the senior that gets the reward, or it's the shareholder that gets the funding, right? So at least they deserve an honest answer, right?
absolutely.
Everybody deserves an honest answer if they participate, especially if it's wrong. And maybe, yeah. So, well, A, that. And if you just ask for ideas, like I said, you get a lot of ideas, very various, and not always connected to the strategy. I can tell you, we had an idea to open a television museum. Yeah, that's not really our business, right? We had an idea to have flying fishes because if people saw animals, there was some sort of research that seeing animals would make you a happier employee, and that would save, well, 3% time or something. They would speed up 3%, but they didn't thought about, oh, somebody has to control those flying fishes, etc. So sometimes you have these like shower ideas, right? Just these random ideas that some pop into your head, and then you cannot say we're not going to do it because it's a stupid idea. No, you want to say we're not going to do it because of this and this and this very valid reason, right? And finding those valid reasons takes time. So just starting with asking for ideas is going to result in a lot of no's that are going to take a lot of effort from your innovation team. And maybe one thing I would like to add, which crossed my mind, Philips, the Dutch electronics company. This is really a report. I think 1980, maybe 1985 or something. But they actually had an ideation platform as well. So they were also collecting ideas from their employees, and then they did an investigation and they said which employee is more likely to participate in a next ideation campaign. An employee whose idea was not accepted, or an employee whose idea got accepted. What do you think?
The employee whose idea was not accepted.
Yeah, and why that is true. Why do you think that?
The reason why I'm thinking is that because this person was more driven to prove that they can ideate, they can create value as one, but could also be that internal intrinsic motivation to get better. and to continuously
Yeah,
improve.
yeah,
While the
yeah.
person who
So
got rewarded probably was like, oh, I accomplished this and I solved that problem and I'm going to keep focusing on that problem, because mind that
yeah,
uh,
yeah,
the problem does rarely repeat. Every problem is unique on its own. And so
yeah.
even all employees, you cannot expect that all of them are going to
Ah,
be equally
yeah,
motivated to solve the same problem. You will have repeat innovators, but you cannot expect that all of them are going to be repeat innovators. Somebody may be
yeah.
driven
No,
for
well,
marketing
there's a
related
little there. Yeah.
problems. Yeah, go ahead.
Now, so that second thing. So they compared it to a tennis match, right? So they said the one that loses the tennis match wants a rematch, right? And the
Mm,
one that won doesn't want a rematch. So that was their explanation on indeed the motivation. I think that's how you shared it. But then they followed up. So they looked deeper into this. So the ones whose idea was not accepted was more likely to participate. But if that person would then participate, they would again participate with a wrong idea, with a not solid idea. And in the cases that that person that whose idea was accepted would participate again, that person was quite likely to again submit a high quality idea. Again, not per se if that is the final answer, but at least it was again a high quality idea. So their rationale was that people whose idea get accepted, those are the ones that you especially need to motivate. So reach
yeah,
out to them individually with the next campaign. You did a great job last time. We would love to see you again in this campaign. And those whose ideas is not accepted, you have to explain why is your idea not accepted and how can you do it better next time.
exactly. You gotta
Right?
give feedback. So even that
Yeah,
original initial feedback first like should come with a bit of recognition. Go like, thank you for participating. Recognize everybody
absolutely.
across the organization. Here are daring innovators. But this also brings me to the conversation earlier we had about the entrepreneurship, because the way that I see it is that entrepreneurship is a kind of program that you want to have in place only once you have mastered some basic ideas. And also once you have clarified what your innovation strategy is. Because
Yeah,
entrepreneurship is so much labor intensive and it does require resources, you cannot expect people to do entrepreneurship on top of their regular job. You have to create time availability in their calendars to work in entrepreneurship, or make entrepreneurship part of the kind of garage, or as you mentioned, playground, where they can go and dedicate all their time to that next big better thing rather than something incrementally. But even when you
yeah,
call for incremental improvements, you want to call those within the working hours. You don't want to call those between after working hours, because cannot claim IP on those ideas afterwards if they're not within the
yeah,
time frame, right? So you can just keep it more legal. But then also this example from the Philips, it also tells me that the clearer you are on what you're trying to solve and ideas about solving what problem you are inviting, the better you position your innovators more strongly for success. Because if you don't have that strategic focus of the call, yes, ideas are going to come in all shapes, in all lengths, and in
yeah.
all different varieties that it's just
Absolutely.
time consuming to even provide feedback. And do you have that capacity to provide feedback? So
No.
you're setting yourself up for failure, and like it's going to be a very costly lesson learned. So that's
Yeah.
why start small.
So yeah, no, absolutely agree. And I have a few things that popped into my head when you were talking. The first thing is indeed think about how to set up the program, right? A lot of those innovation initiatives start with one person who is eager to do it, right? It's the crazy innovator who launches a program. And that was me as well, right? So when I was thinking about how am I gonna scale it globally, well, again, we launched it in 5 countries. I think we were around 5,000 ideas. The innovation department was this. That was the innovation department at the time, right?
What do you
So
mean with
I
this?
really my 2 hands.
Ah,
That was
the
it.
small
I didn't
department,
have
you mean?
colleagues. That was the entire department. So
Just
no,
you.
yeah,
Oh,
it was me.
one person
And of
show.
course, and let me be clear, I had people in the different operating units who were sort of helping there, but I was the only one who was 100% of my function was innovation, right? So yeah, you can only do so much. I'm super active and I think I'm pretty effective, but yeah, I cannot just run with 5,000 ideas. Um, so think about how to set it up. And one of the big things I realized, I was actually at an innovation forum listening to Airbus, how Airbus was doing it. Um, and that made me eventually create what I like to call innovation management as a service. So I set up innovation almost as a support department. I like to compare it with HR. I was the one who was going to all the conferences, collecting data, reading all the books that you see here, to understand how should we do innovation. I was able to, pinpoint the right question, whatever, coach people with experimenting. But that was it, right? Just like HR is helping business units when they want to hire somebody, right? They
Mhm,
know the
mhm.
the legal stuff. They know how to write a proper vacancy. They know how to what kind of questions to ask. But eventually, it's the business manager who decides who becomes the hire, right? And that was also for me. I'm not going to decide which idea you're going to implement. It's your problem. So you can. Hey, and I have 10 solutions for you. Pick one. I don't care. That's your thing. So I really set it up as a service department, and that allowed me obviously uh, to sort of engage
Mhm.
hands in that sense from the requesting department to make sure that everything was done. And of course, also, I ran campaigns to come up with new network topologies. So the way of putting the cables into the ground. Yeah, you know,
Not. Why
I
not?
I just I couldn't read ideas. The ideas are just lines of abbreviations that I never heard of and technical terms that I didn't understood. But I was able to manage the campaign, because I had
Yes,
technicals people behind me that I could tell, hey, look at those ideas and give them an answer. Um, so that is, I think, one of the ways to do it. And I think over my whatever 16 years that I've been in innovation now, I think that makes a lot of sense to see it as such a department.
like that approach because I've seen that in few other companies, and I like it better than when innovation department takes over the responsibility of innovating. It could be good on something, but and could be focused on certain kinds of innovation that are necessary strategically for the business. But I really believe and I really appreciate and I cheer for all the organizations when I see that they have built this capability, innovation capability, and distributed that across the organization. Because as we mentioned at the very beginning, innovation is a human skill. It's a skill that complements every other skill because the way that I address it, it's a problem solving that sells. Because you mentioned the sales skill, but I don't mean that it sells in terms that it always has a monetary transaction in it. But it sells because it gets adopted and practiced by those that whose problem it solves. And sometimes those are even new
Yeah,
procedures, new processes, new programs, new initiatives within the organization. So there's not necessarily any monetary transaction there. And so, like,
yeah,
when departments come in this consultant, this catalyst role to see themselves as the builders of these capabilities, I think that that's the most sustainable way of managing innovation via the innovation department in any organization.
yeah, absolutely. And just to add, also as an innovation management as a service department, you can still also offer like a little separated startup area, right?
Yes,
Um, true business model innovation ideas are often better off separated from the business because otherwise there's too much sort of skepticism and whatever. But so it doesn't mean that everything needs to be out in the open, but it means that indeed it's not like a consultancy club that is doing innovation for you. It's innovation
No.
doing done together.
And on that startup, like, I think that could be so well matched with the entrepreneurship program, that when you see that some idea is really evolving and is very promising, you move it to a certain independence capacity. So it grows and operates independent of other hands and influences of the business. So then it
Yeah,
does have, but it has to be
yeah. No,
a graduated kind of status of innovation management within the
absolutely,
company.
absolutely.
I think
So,
that's
so no, 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 and that's sort of what, well, some companies call it speedboats, some companies call it internal startups. But indeed, those are teams in a way, right? Often you're beyond the solo entrepreneur at that moment, right? Often there's a team around a certain solution for a problem, or maybe sometimes even multiple solutions that indeed are almost like a little internal startup within the company, partly uh, reinventing the world and maybe also partly reusing, right?
yeah.
If that new business model still needs HR, yeah, you don't have to reinvent HR, right?
No.
So um, I think no, so you definitely have to help them to be able to be independent, and I think that's quite key because, well, obviously I've been talking about my entrepreneurship boxes, and I strongly believe in the value of physical boxes, by the way, because it helps the promotion. But overall, the main thing that we did with that is we gave them a license to innovate. So we literally gave them a paper signed by their manager and their line manager, so the big boss and the direct
Mhm.
boss, that they were allowed to work on the topics that we defined as a company that we want you to innovate upon, that they got certain time and that they got a little investment budget. So we, the at Liberty Global, people got half a day per week. So they got the 2-day training, right? And in the 90 days that they were sort of applying it in real life, they got half a day per week and they got 600 euros to do experiments.
Which is fantastic. A very genuine innovation capability distribution across the organization. And I like that.
Yeah, and do
Yeah,
you know what I think is the biggest thing what you do with this is proving that you actually trust your people. You
exactly.
know, we talk about methodologies, we talk about money. The thing is, we trust you to walk outside the lines that we set, right? You are allowed. Again, there are some boundaries that we don't want you to step outside of, but you don't always have to walk that process that we defined. We trust you to go outside, and just that is sort of creating real entrepreneurs.
And, this reminds me that of a current reality, and that is that we're seeing a tendency of companies losing faith in their people and passing that faith into the AI. How I think this is like these are the times of a stress test in a way that we are living through. And so, are there ways to marry the AI and internal innovation, or are we seeing the AI eliminating the human potential uh, to innovate, or substituting the human to innovate? I want to
Yeah,
believe that there are the AI is still a tool at the human's hands and can help us innovate. But I want to learn from your perspective. Like, how can we see these two working together more?
yeah.
Better?
Well, maybe to start with, I'm always very annoyed with those statements that consultancy is dead, innovation is dead due to AI, because you can just ask AI to make a PowerPoint. Technically, that's right. But again, it's about what's in the PowerPoint. It's what's in the question, right? So, um, yes, AI can definitely be a helpful tool. but I don't think that it will create better problem definitions, because that is a very important skill, right? To really dive into the real problem. Um, I don't see that happening, especially because AI is in a way sort of repeating what we already did, right? It's looking at what we have been doing over the past few years, and repeating that. And innovation, in a way, is also coming up with new things. Um, it can definitely help. Absolutely, AI is better in making sort of connections in data that we are not even able to read in our lifetime. It can definitely speed up things. Like a landing page. I actually my office, is my office for which I obviously built as an independent. But because I'm now not here anymore, I thought about, hey, maybe I can rent it out, right? So I just asked AI to create a landing page for me, and I ran a little experiment to see if there was appetite to rent my office. Well, negative experiment, so I could push that away. But sorry, a little story in between. So in that way, it can definitely speed up and help, I think, building experiments, and maybe also be inspirational in ideation, but coming up with really new ways I haven't seen yet from AI. And as far as I understand, it's almost impossible. Um,
So then, where do you see you need?
but it can. I want to end with one line, because it can help speed up things. And in all reality, I'm very afraid that that will also backfire. Again, I'm afraid that most people are now, oh, we can have AI do that, and then again take the simple start into innovation, which eventually leads to wrong test results. Um, Directly going for a high fidelity prototype is overall not the best way to get genuine feedback on your idea, right? Because then people think, oh, that looks beautiful. They put a lot of time in. I'm just going to be positive. Where if you just do a quick sketch, people think, oh, it's just a sketch. I can give honest feedback. Um, so directly moving into those high fidelity prototypes is also, I think, a very big danger for innovation, um, because it um, it hurts sort of the value that comes out of experimenting.
That's interesting, because that's interesting what you say, because I've been playing with what I call micro products with AI, and by putting micro products. And so, as micro products, they're pretty good to give you that first insight and first feedback from the customer on whether this
Yeah,
resonates.
yeah,
Is they tell the story better than you telling, or like better than few sketches. But if you go, because with AI, you're right, you can go and develop a more sophisticated, say, full website, a full platform in a matter of hours of what used to be days and weeks. And then what I'm thinking now, you're just making it more difficult for the customer to give you feedback. So when you develop that high
yeah.
fidelity prototype, then it's going to take you longer time to get proper feedback, because it's going to take longer time the customer to go through it. So again, you want to use AI for quick feedback, and think about the user's experience even for the feedback provision. So don't overuse it.
Yes,
Hey.
yeah.
Don't overuse it.
No, and I think it's very easy to think, oh, we just skip a few, so I'm not sure if you know the theory of Alberto Savoia from the Right It. He is the former innovation director of Google, and
Mhm.
he says that before prototyping, you need to do prototyping. So that's sort of like a completely fake version of your idea and try to get that sold in a way, right? So a landing page is a landing page which maybe shows a product, but the product doesn't exist yet. With a buy button is a
Mhm.
prototype. I have actually that Palm Pilot, right? The guy that came up with the
Mhm.
idea of having a phone where you could check your agenda and email. He he walked around with a block of wood in his pocket, right? A few days to see, do I actually have the need to check my calendar during the day? So he literally walked. Yeah, I have it somewhere in my closet. He walked around with a wooden block. Um, IBM with voice to text, right? They tested it by having people talk to a computer and the text appeared on screen, but in reality there were other people behind the wall just typing, right? So the product didn't exist, but they allowed people to use. I actually have a
I
so we
remember
did
that.
actually did this at we did this at Liberty at a certain moment. So we had a collaboration with the Techno University for sort of Horizon 3 innovations, right?
Mhm.
Because young people from different backgrounds with a product design background, we felt, hey, we're going to put the big questions with those guys. So we said, what is television looking like in, well, we probably said a year, but whatever, 10 years, 15 years ahead, right? So they came up with a way where like 4D television, I would say, right? So you could watch the movie, but if there was, I don't know, you were on a sailing boat, you actually felt the wind and you sometimes even felt a splash of water. If you saw an explosion, you felt the explosion, the vibration, right? Well, you can imagine that's super expensive to build, right? To really
Mhm.
make this and run a high fidelity prototype on this is highly expensive. So what they did, they set up a sofa with a television where we could invite people to watch a movie, but behind the sofa were, I think, 8, 9, maybe 10 students, and one was controlling the fan, and one was had a spray, a plant spray in his
Mhm.
head. So when the boat sailed and a wave hit the boat, somebody hit the fan and somebody did a little spray. So as a user, you actually experience their idea in real life without building it. That's the sort of the idea. And based on that, we could collect feedback from end users or customers and decide, is this valid to invest further in? And I think those kinds of things, to get back to the AI question,
Mhm.
I wouldn't be surprised, say it like that, if people are going to be very enticed to just move all the desirability testing and directly go to a sort of like a full-fledged product. Um, which again, then you're just building something that you don't really know if people want it. And even if it's then a false build due to AI, it's the wrong build.
And with this, I love to conclude this conversation with one foundational key takeaway, which is same as actually we started, but that is that there's still a lot of space and role in innovation for the human. So we can use AI, we can use analog tools to innovate. But we need to start with the problems, and we can always start by trying to figure out how to make things better, because we will be the ones who will be able to identify the opportunities to make something better. And with that sad rule, I would love to ask you, as I ask all my guests, is there one thing about innovation, specifically about internal employee innovation, that you don't have an answer to yet and would love to ask the audience of this podcast for their opinions or answers to it? What is one thing that
Ooh.
puzzles you?
I'm a bit going back and forth, but no, I will go for. So as we said, right? I think we strongly believe that innovation strategy needs to be in line with the overall company strategy to make it effective and to make sure that you're looking for the right ideas. I could even argue that it should be one strategy in a way. But overall, I see that most organizations don't have a real strategy. They mainly have buzzwords, right? Customer centric or
Mhm.
very innovative or something like that, that nobody knows what it means. So, well, if this would be something that your listeners are gonna answer, I would like to hear examples how innovation teams or innovation strategists created have been able to sort of identify that innovation strategy without a very clear company strategy. And I understand that you can talk with those people, but that's my experience is that that doesn't always happen.
Well, let's see what people have to say.
Yeah.
And before I let you go, how can the audience find you And is there anything particular you would love to share with them? Because I think that there is something nice that you want to, a kind of a gift from you to them.
Yeah, well, thanks for asking indeed. Well, we obviously talked about entrepreneurship, and that's sort of has been my life since whatever 2015. And well, I'm not sure if we talked about it, but since a few months I became the innovation strategist of a Dutch government. So that's my main work at the moment. But to keep sharing my thoughts around entrepreneurship, I launched a newsletter which I call Letter of Mark, which, by the way, is actually the license pirates got to sail under the flag of the Navy. So it's I told you about that license to innovate.
Only
I
enemy
see this.
ships, not every ship, but only enemy ships.
Yeah. No, indeed. So it were their boundaries, be a pirate within these boundaries, right?
Yeah.
So obviously building upon the book of Tendai Viki, Pirates in the Navy, it obviously built on that idea of, you want innovators within a company, but not as the crazy startup, right? I often compare it also with that line of Steve Jobs. It's cooler to be a pirate than to join the Navy. But even that, he said at a developers conference, right? He didn't want his developers to move out and launch their own company. No, he wanted them to be the pirate within the Navy that Apple was. Well, and a pirate that sails under the flag of the Navy with that license, with that letter of marque license, is called a privateer. So, that's where people can find me. Sorry, that's I think the question. So obviously on LinkedIn, Roel De Vries is where people can find me. I love to connect. Always love to connect with people. And obviously people can follow my content on the Letter of Mark newsletter that is on Substack. But you can find it through LinkedIn.
Roel, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. Thank you so much for coming. And I look forward to a lot of similar conversations in the future. And in the meantime, I wish you all the good luck, all the best luck possible to continue help organizations innovate, and especially the government organizations. So very much good luck.
Well, thanks for having me. Really enjoyed the talk, and indeed, let's continue in multiple chats.
Absolutely. I was excited to talk to Roel today and to deepen my understanding about activating internal innovators from his firsthand experience, but also to get an answer to the question that I started this conversation with. And that was, why do organizations keep missing on the innovators already inside? And the answer turns out to be sometimes simpler than I may have thought. And what I learned from Roel is that simply because no one is asking, but then when people start asking, or when leaders start asking, they ask for ideas, not for solutions to specific problems. And when they get better and start asking about the problems, they don't always ask the right question. So when you don't ask the right question, you cannot expect the right answer, right? And then there is work after asking. And that's the work that takes a courageous leader, a leader willing to trust their people, to give them the freedom to think, to tinker, to give them a playground where they can bring their ideas, try them, test them, and mature them within the boundaries of that playground before those ideas are ready to go out to the world, regardless whether that world is within the organization or beyond its boundaries. So yes, companies do miss on the innovation potential inside because they don't have a playground for the employees to test their ideas safely. I'd love to hear what you took away from this conversation. Is there anything else that you learned that is worth highlighting? And along the way, let us know what you think of Roel's question as well. As tradition goes, we concluded the episode with a question that Roel is puzzled about when it comes to innovation management. After a career spent in the innovation work, he noticed that a lot of organizations do not have real innovation strategy. They have buzzwords like customer centricity, very innovative, But it turns out that phrases like these are becoming less and less understandable by the ones who need to work on them. They become phrases that nobody can define if you stop them in the hallway and ask. So Roel would love to hear from you. And his question is simple. How have innovation teams or innovation strategists been able to identify an innovation strategy when the company does not have a clear business strategy to anchor it to? Roel and I would love to learn from you, so share your answers in comments via DMs, or we hope that we have inspired you to share your own video post. And in case you do, please tag us so we can follow on the conversation, because I'm certain that this is a topic that a lot of people have something to share about, and a lot of other people will benefit from learning from our insights. And if today's episode has sparked your curiosity to learn more about how you might uncover the innovators already in your organization, go to opensolvestudio.com, because that's exactly the reason why we exist, to help leaders like you uncover and cultivate that internal innovation potential and turn it into a capability. I'm Iliriana Kacaniku, and this was Activate Innovation Lounge podcast. Until next conversation, stay curious and keep activating.